By no means the first parliamentary debate of its kind. Since they were first debated in Parliament, dozens of public petitions have been heard. But how could you get your petition discussed by MPs? Here's Ellie with her Cut Out and Keep Daily Politics Guide.
Every now and then the House of Commons has to deal with a petition on some subject or another. And this time it's on the rising cost of living.
It's a strong tradition. The mighty British petition.
75 Irish civil rights campaigners marched from Trafalgar Square to Downing Street to hand in a petition demanding an inquiry into the conduct of Londonderry police.
A chance for ordinary people to stand up and be counted for the important things they care about. Like being allowed to ride a Segway on the road. They may look like slightly aggrieved lottery winners, but these people were petitioning to save the cheque. And then, of course, there are a couple about Jeremy Clarkson becoming Prime Minister, keeping his job at the BBC, that sort of thing. Successive governments have acknowledged the power of them. Downing Street launched an e-petition site in November 2006. It got beefed up last year. Now, if a petition on the government website gets more than 100,000 signatures, a committee of MPs decide whether to give it any parliamentary time. And since 2011, there have been 32 petitions that started here that ended up being debated in some way in Westminster. As of this morning, there were well over 5,000 petitions on this site. Of course, they have mixed amounts of support. So the one about Theresa May going on a night shift with a police officer, allowing armed forces personnel to have a neatly trimmed beard, or making antifreeze less tasty for cats, may have some way to go.
Enemies of freedom.
The big one coming up is the one about him being allowed in the UK because he said this.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
More than 574,000 people signed the petition against Donald Trump coming to the country. The MP introducing the debate doesn't agree with them, but he does think today is a crucial exercise in democracy.
It's extremely unlikely we'd have a vote. But the whole point is that we use parliaments, like many other debates we have, to ventilate issues. If there's an impassioned view comes from this debate that it's in the national interest to ban Trump, well, that would affect government policy.
Mrs. Hilda Davis is first in the ring against bread rationing. She aims to get 10,000 signatures on a hands-off-our-food petition.
The top 5 most popular petitions on the government's website have 2 million signatures between them. The idea of petitions isn't a new one, but modern technology may have made the voice of the people a little louder.
Well, we're joined now by the UKIP MEP David Coburn and Green Party leader Natalie Bennett, who supports banning Donald Trump from the UK. Welcome to both of you. Why should he be banned?
Well, I think we've seen under the provisions that the Home Secretary has to not give a visa to someone whose presence is not conducive to the public good, about 200 people have been banned under that provision. I think it's reasonable to say that Donald Trump, of the kind of words that we've just been hearing, fits that. He would not be, as the terms of the early day motion that MPs signed said, this would not be good for community cohesion, not be good for Britain, so it's reasonable to not give him a visa.
I mean, he could win the nomination for the Republicans. I mean, there is, I suppose, the slightest possibility he might become President of the United States.
Well, of course, what we're doing is talking about, at the moment, the situation at the moment and what his track record is at the moment. I think it's extraordinarily unlikely, but were it to happen, I think he would have to have backpedalled on some of the things that he said, which would, of course, if someone later says, I may have said the wrong thing then, people are allowed to change their mind.
I mean, do you think he'd be good for community cohesion? Do you think those comments are actually do him any favours in terms of coming to this country?
Certainly not. What he said was ridiculous, because how you decide who's going to be a Muslim, it's not based on race, it's a religion, or grouping, or whatever. So it's utterly ludicrous.
So
how do you know who
then?
is? Well, because I'm a great believer in freedom of speech, unlike Natalie, and we're a libertarian party. We like to let people speak their minds. I would rather defeat the man in the public arena in the discussion, like Nick Griffin was taken apart. They kept him off television for years, and what happened when they finally put him on television? He was destroyed. I'd much rather see him put in the public arena than that. He also highlights things now and again which are not entirely, are being ignored by a lot of the public.
Like what?
Well, the problems we're having generally politically, with the Middle East, all that sort of stuff, he's willing to talk about it. A lot of other people want to just hide things under the carpet. But most importantly, I mean, the thing about Donald Trump is, he makes Dr. Strangelove seem like a documentary rather than fiction. And it's terrifying, the thought that he could be president of the United States. He makes a lot of money in business. I'm sure he's good at that sort of thing. But in terms of running the world, I think that's rather worrying. Yeah. But the thing is, he may become president, so we can't just ignore him. We have to,
But why not take him on in the way that David is saying? Why not take him on? Why not defeat him if you don't agree with his argument?
Well, I think the thing is that we're in a different situation to we were with the BNP. That was, of course, part of British society, a regrettable part of British society, part of British society. This is a question of allowing someone in, and we've made the decision in about 200 previous cases not to do that. For example, of a case of a guy who billed himself as a seduction expert who was advocating violence against women. It was said him coming to Britain would not be for the good of Britain, therefore he was banned. So there is something different about non-EU nationals.
Is Donald Trump not in a slightly different category?
Oh, Donald Trump is not advocating killing people all over the world. He's not advocating the sort of stuff that the IS are advocating. So, there's a wholly different situation. And, if he'd been anybody else, and if anyone else in the world had said, you've been screaming about other things, I just love it the way that, that there's a problem, this, as far as I'm concerned, this is a women's issue, and I'm not happy about what's happening there. You don't scream about that, but you'll scream about
But let's pick up on the freedom of speech, though, particularly, because isn't it inhibiting that very basic principle that does exist, that is, people are allowed to say what they think?
Well, I think that the great principle that we're seeing here is the freedom of speech, and this is being debated today because 600,000 British people have signed the petition. Now, 40,000 also signed the petition on the other side. So what is great, I think, is that MPs are actually debating what the public has told them they're concerned about. So, it's a very small step forward for our democracy when we have such a democratic deficit with, a parliament that doesn't represent the people.
Is it worth debating, or is it a waste of time?
Well, I actually would agree with Natalie on that. I think the new petition system and the way that it's scrutinised does allow people to have some kind of debate and say in, and I think there does need to be some kind of, as Paul Flynn has said, some kind of look at that, what comes in. But I think that's a forward step.
Right. Should he be banned?
I don't think so. I think you should use the banning order very sparingly, but we'll be interested to see what people say today.
Do you agree, Kit Morehouse, with David Coburn, that he does actually say things that need to be discussed on issues like the Middle East, for example?
Well, a broken clock's right twice a day, right? So he's going to happen randomly on one or two issues that might be pertinent. But the truth is, the guy's a sort of poltroon. He's a clown. He's what his words were, foul and detestable, and we should all acknowledge that. I mean, I actually think the
doing
debate,
very well in the polls.
I think the debate today is a good idea, because if anybody, if internationally somehow we can bring home to Americans that their decision has about who they elect and who they select as candidate has international implications, then by all means we should. I mean, I don't think fundamentally we should ban him. I don't think we can go around doing that if he wins becomes president of the United States. But he certainly hasn't made many friends in Scotland, where he has an awful lot of money invested.
Well, he did invest, yes.
Well, I disagree with just almost everything he says, but I must admit what he said about the former First Minister seemed to be quite about the only thing I could possibly agree with.
Well, ask yourself this, right? If it substitute other ethnic minorities in the phrase that he used, and what kind of reaction there would have been, right, other than Muslims?
Although he's not the only leader to be talking about Muslims. The Czech president has said it's impossible to integrate Muslim communities, and he said that post incidents like Cologne and Stockholm. Is he equally offensive?
Well, I think there is a problem that has to be discussed. There is a problem with integrating people. There's too many people coming, and that's the problem they've got in the outer rim of Paris. There are far too many people have arrived there. They are not being integrated into French society. Therefore, you're getting jihadis and all sorts of nonsense coming out of that. And it's because you've got too many people and not integrating them. In Scotland, we don't have bad race relations simply because we don't have too many people.
And I'm going to have to stop you now.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.